Hi, I'm Joan Michelson. Welcome to Green Connection. So I'm here with Dr. Francine Gordon, who is a gender and innovation specialist. Two topics very near and dear to my heart. We're here at the VERGE San Francisco 2013 conference, and it's been all about innovation in sustainability and environmental issues. And from an economic standpoint, from a business standpoint, from a large institution standpoint, we've had startups, we've had some great people pitching, really the gambit. And what I'd like to talk to you about with your specialization is how do we need in large companies, we need to drive innovation within these large groups, okay? And we have so many dynamics going on. We have the performance review and compensation messages that are coming through. We have the nonverbal cultural cues that are going on. We have the, if I'm too out of the box, I feel like my job might be threatened. So how do we really drive innovation in a large organization?
Great question. One of the factors is the corporate culture. Many companies that say, oh, we want great innovation, and the first time somebody makes a mistake, off with their heads. For years, GE used to reward the greatest failure. A failure that was a sensible, reasonable attempt to do something wildly different that didn't work. And instead of saying we're going to fire the person, they saw that as, okay, what can we learn from it? What can we apply?
And that's a good example. That's an example of what you should do.
That's what you should do. Most companies, the fear is if I make any kind of mistake, I'm going to be out the door or I'll be demoted.
Right.
And you can't function in that environment. You need to feel like I can take risks.
Right.
And if you take risks, by definition, some of them are not going to work. The only way you'll be sure that something will work is if it's been done before.
So how do you develop a risk of we have risk-averse cultures.
Right.
So how do you develop a risk-taker culture?
There are lots of things, and many of the companies that are highly innovative really model that behavior, like a Google.
The 20% time?
20% time, which is also what 3M does, right? You have a
3M
percent of
does the
time
same thing.
that you can use, and in point of fact, one of their big successes, and the story that most people know is the Post-it notes, which was somebody's side project, and it was a failed experiment, by the way. Many innovations are failed experiments. It was an attempt to come up with a very strong glue, and it was a failed experiment because this glue kept coming off. But somebody had the ability to say, oh, it won't do this purpose, which we started with, but it will be very functional over here.
Right, my understanding is it was somebody who kept taping notes to their computer, and then when this came around, they were able to affix it, and they got all really excited. Well, you raised something that's really interesting because we send mixed signals in the room,
we ever?
right?
Yes.
And it's this, it's we want change, we want innovation, but don't change anything I decided, don't change anything I funded, don't change anything that rocks my boat. So it's kind of, a mixed message.
It's not kind of,
It is a mixed message. So how do we get around that? And because you focus on gender and innovation, what role does diversity and gender mix play in this scenario altogether? I mean, does that affect the culture? What does that do? So what?
So one of the biggest issues with innovation is people think they know something that they don't know. And you need to have a different perspective. So this is not going to deal with gender. I'll get back to the gender issue, but let me start with a great example. A friend of mine led the team that developed the tiles for the heat shield on the space shuttle. Okay. And they were trying to come up with a lightweight, flexible shield that would protect the astronauts. And it had to do with particular materials, and they tried a whole lot of different things. And at one point, they had to do with these glass, these squares. And at one point, he talked to a chemical engineer, and he said, I'm thinking if we soak this in this particular chemical, this would work. And the engineer said, absolutely not. That will not work. So they tried a whole bunch of other things, and 4 or 5 months later, they still hadn't come up with something. And so his name is Dan Rasky. Dan basically said, nothing else worked. We'll try it. It worked. That was the solution. The chemical engineer didn't say, I think it's unlikely, or this is why I think it might. It was just, it will not work. And if Dan had listened to him, who knows how much longer it would have been, or if they even would have come up with that particular methodology. So very often people are sure they know the answer. I know that won't work. When in point of fact, maybe it didn't work then, or maybe it didn't work in that circumstance, and yet there's an unwillingness to let that go.
Reminds me of the Einstein quote that I really love, which is the people who say it cannot be done should not interfere with those who are doing it. Yes,
absolutely.
I love that. You know, you bring up the issue of failure, and I don't see things as failures. I see them as steps along the way.
Absolutely.
I mean, the obvious other quote is I believe it was Edison or Ben Franklin who said, I didn't fail 10,000 times, I found 10,000 ways it didn't work.
The light bulb won't work.
The light bulb, okay, it was Edison.
Yep.
So every outcome that's different than what we intended, to me, is a step along the way to innovating something else. And the Post-it is a classic example.
Oh, there's so many, well, one of the big drug successes of the most recent century, right?
Well, before you get to that, let's talk, because we only have a couple minutes
gender.
left. Yes, talk about the gender issue.
So one of the things that's really important for innovation is diversity on every level. Gender, racial, technical background. There was research that was done at the London School of Economics around 2007, 2008, where they consciously went out, they looked at 100 companies in 17 countries in different industries where they had teams that were pretty well matched male-female, and they looked at the impact on the innovative output. And they found that the teams that were optimal were the teams that were 50% male, 50% female, except teams that had a few more women where it was a 60-40 female-male. Those teams tended to have what they called more self-confidence and were more willing to take action because they believed in themselves.
Wow, so why the gender? What does gender have to do with it?
First of all, when you have a group that's in the minority, and it doesn't matter which way, if you have a predominantly female group with one or two men or the other way around.
That's why I'm curious about the more women thing.
Part of it has to do with women tend to be, and again, it's a gross exaggeration, but women tend to be more, gross generalization, women tend to be more socially aware. So they tend to work the interpersonal dynamics more effectively, which will help the group in terms of being able to function well, help with the communication, help with the mutual understanding.
Wow, that's so powerful. Well, Francine and I could talk forever. Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Francine Gordon, Innovation Specialist, particularly in gender and diversity. I'm Joan Michelson for Green Connections from the San Francisco VERGE Conference, and you can hear everybody in the background. Thank you so much. See you next time.